Okay, if you've been following my channel over the past few months, you'll know that ever since I switched over to using the Pixel 6 at the back end of last year, I've actually continued to use it as my everyday device. So that means my one and only SIM card has lived, for the most part, exclusively in this phone since about November. And for someone who reviews phones for a living, that's actually a really long time. But with the release of the Galaxy S22 lineup not too long ago, smartphone season really has kicked back into gear. And so rather than having one main everyday device that I revert back to in between reviews, I usually just keep using whatever phone I'm currently reviewing until I switch over to the next one that I'm reviewing. And so that means it's essentially time to say so long, farewell to the Pixel 6 as my everyday device. But because of that, I wanted to do a final updated review to let you know why I continued using it for so long and why I still recommend it for anyone looking to upgrade their Android phone and also save a bit of cash. So with that being said, here is my updated 6-month later review of the regular Pixel 6. Now, before we get to the key features that kept me using this phone for so long, let's first tackle the question everyone is probably asking. Have the updates fixed all of the various issues? Well, let's unpack each of them. So the issue where the display would randomly clock itself down to 60 Hz without rhyme or reason and stay that way until you rebooted the phone, yep, that's now fixed and it no longer happens. I think that one was fixed with the January update. The issue where I would stop receiving notifications randomly, yep, that was fixed pretty quickly with the December update, which I actually manually sideloaded before the files got pulled down. What about the fingerprint sensor? Well, from the get-go, I always found that the sensor on this phone was quicker and more reliable than the one found on the 6 Pro. And for the most part, I haven't even noticed this sensor, which I think is a good sign. Whether it's improved, for me, I don't think it's much better than when I first started using it. But again, it's never been a deal breaker or something I've ever noticed, so take that for what it is. Oh, hey, Editing Sam here, and remember that issue I mentioned in my initial review where the keyboard would randomly freeze? Well, when I initially recorded the A-roll for this video, it was still in fact happening. And I'd actually found an article that explained how the issue was for some reason tied to the battery percentage dropping. And I even tested it myself to confirm that this was in fact what was happening, and it was. But during the editing process of this video, a fix was finally released. So thank goodness that no longer happens. As for Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connectivity issues, I've actually never experienced either with my unit, so I can't officially speak to them, but from what I've read, these issues were also fixed with that same recent update. And so all of that being said, if any of the above bugs have been putting you off from buying this phone, well, they've actually now all been fixed, and the software is even more reliable than it already was. All right, that's enough from Editing Sam. Back to the main video. Now, from there, I do want to address the areas in which I felt the device is still lacking, just so that if you're someone who places any of the following as a really high priority, then you'll know straight away that this might not be the phone for you. The first of which is the display. Now, I want to stress that this is not a bad display, and in fact, I really like most aspects about it. Some might be disappointed with the fact that it's 90 Hz and not 120 Hz like its more premium flagship brother, but I actually don't have an issue with that aspect at all. What I have found to be slightly underwhelming is how bright the display gets. Again, this hasn't been a deal breaker for me, but whenever I've switched to using another phone for a video I'm filming or for some other reason, I've always found myself coming back to the Pixel 6 and being slightly underwhelmed with how bright it can get. In the brightest of conditions where you're wearing sunglasses, you can still see the display, but only just, and it's certainly got nothing on the really bright displays of the recent S22 lineup of phones. And then the second aspect I've really missed not having on this phone is a telephoto lens. I've mentioned it lots now, but as someone with 2 kids often playing a distance away from where I am, I honestly just find that I don't capture as many photos or videos because I know I'm too far away. And I know that digital zoom is only going to get me so far. When I was using the 6 Pro, or even when I switched to the iPhone 13 Pro for a short while just recently, all of a sudden I found myself capturing far more photos and videos thanks purely to the fact that both phones had telephoto lenses. Now again, thanks to how much more affordable this phone is compared to both of those devices, I can't really complain about the lack of a telephoto lens or the 90Hz display that isn't super bright. But for the next iteration of this phone, I would love for Google to just blow us all out of the water and whack even just a 2x telephoto lens onto the back of this phone, but preferably a 3x lens. That would be a game changer. All right, before we get to the reasons why I've continued using this phone for so long, I do want to take a quick moment to thank today's video sponsor, Anti-Stalker Mobile Security. So, you ever find yourself having a conversation with someone only to then find that later that day you start seeing ads on your phone specifically related to what you were talking about? This is something called targeted marketing, and it can actually come about because certain apps on your phone are listening in on your conversations in the background. And so this is where Anti-Stalker comes into play. Anti-Stalker can detect any instance of an app using your microphone or camera and will then show you a full breakdown of these apps, including how long they were using the microphone or camera for, as well as showing you which apps have sent your data and where they have sent it to. So you can click on the detection and see the IP, the domain, and the country where its server is located and collecting your data from. It also shows you if the domain is identified as stalkerware, suspicious, or as a data tracker, and fair warning, you may find the results a little shocking. But the app doesn't just show you what apps are being sneaky, it'll actually allow you to block them, which it does so by creating a local VPN, and this means those apps just won't be able to track or send your data anymore. On top of that, the app also features whitelisting, an anti-theft alarm, a permission manager, a quick toggle to mute your microphone, plus a stack more. And beyond all of that, it's actually free to download. So make sure to use my link down in the description to check it out and start protecting your phone today. And so from there, we come to the great aspects of this phone. The features that kept me using it for so long, even though I had a lot of other much more expensive options sitting in the cupboard. And for me, there are really three main components that put it above the rest: the software, the design, and the haptics. So firstly, the software. And I'll admit, when I first started using Android 12, I really didn't like it. But as with most controversial software updates, over time, I've actually come to really enjoy Android 12. And I think I'm gonna miss this particular pixel flavor of Android 12 whenever I switch over to other phones this year. Features like how quickly the phone boots up, or this beautifully implemented one-hand mode, even the back tap functionality to quickly open up a particular app or shortcut is super helpful. But aside from all of that, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, the real game changer that makes Android 12 so good are all of those beautiful buttery animations across the entire OS. Now, on top of that, for anyone who doesn't know, I've actually rooted my Pixel 6, and that is actually part of why I've kept using it for so long. It's meant that I haven't had to use Google's silly Pixel launcher, which makes for an awful customization experience, but rather, I've been using a Magisk module called Quick Switch to set a third-party launcher called Launcher 12 as my default launcher. And that means now I can both customize my home screen and continue to have those buttery animations when using gestures. You might then ask, well, why not just use a phone that lets you customize the stock launcher rather than rooting a phone? But this is where I have to give props to Google. Intentionally or not, they just make the rooting process so dang easy, much easier compared to pretty much every other device on the market. I've actually got videos that walk through the entire Pixel 6 rooting process and videos that cover how to continue using banking apps with a rooted phone. So if you're interested, I'll leave a playlist linked below. But if Google hadn't made it so easy to root their phones, then I actually probably wouldn't still be using the Pixel 6. But secondly, the design. And aside from the glossy back, nearly everything else about the design of this phone is excellent. For starters, these matte rails, which I think make the phone just that much more comfortable to hold. Then we have the flat display, which I think makes it much easier to use. And then finally, we have this camera bar on the back, which means there is no wobble whatsoever when using this phone flat on a table, which is actually something I've really appreciated and have missed when using other phones. The only other downside in regards to design are these slightly thicker than usual bezels, but judging from the leaked renders of the Pixel 7 lineup, this is one of the few aspects Google will be improving with the next lineup. But no joke, out of all of the Android phones I used and reviewed last year, this one had my favorite feel in the hand, which is actually a super high priority for me. And then finally, the haptics. And if you've watched literally any of my phone reviews, you should know how highly I value good haptics in a phone. And for me, this phone has the best haptics of any Android phone released over the past 2 years. And that's because they're firm yet subtle, which is such an important and apparently hard combination to nail. Even the 6 Pro goes too hard with their haptics. But the haptics in this phone have just made typing and navigating around the OS feel really premium. And it's honestly made the phone a true joy to use. Oh, and actually one bonus component I love with this phone is the battery life. Even back in my initial review, I was raving about how good the battery life was, and it has remained just as reliable and impressive to this day. Now, is it iPhone 13 Pro or Pro Max level? No, but it's actually better than the 6 Pro and a lot of other devices in this mid to flagship pricing territory. And so after all this time, I've got to be honest and say I'm sad to be wrapping up my time with the Pixel 6. It has been a very solid performer over the past few months, and I dare say it's probably going to take me a little while to stop missing it. So for me, if the lack of a telephoto lens and the slightly under par display aren't deal breakers for you, then given the price, this is a phone I can still highly recommend. And as the year progresses and we get closer to the release of the Pixel 7 lineup, this phone is going to become even more discounted and therefore even more viable. So if you've been on the fence, I say go for it, but either way, hats off to a fantastic device from Google, and I look forward to seeing how they build from this going forward.